These days, it feels like every time you turn around, there is a new crisis. The birth rate crisis, the education crisis, the AI jobs crisis, and of course, the masculinity crisis. There's always something wrong, something that threatens our way of life, our very existence, and that's why so many forms of media report on it. People need to be made aware of these issues because if we know them, we can do something about them. We can prevent humanity from being wiped out. But a lot of you probably have the same question as I do. Are these crises even real? Are they even a threat to begin with? Is humanity constantly on the brink of extinction, or do we live in an age of manufactured crisis? That's what we're discussing this week, so without further ado, let's talk about why everything feels like a crisis. Okay, first and foremost, we can't talk about all of these crisis headlines without also talking about our ever-increasing online presence. For the last several years, average daily use of social media in any form has been hovering at around 2.5 hours. And I don't know if you know this, but that's a lot. Naturally, with all that time being spent online, we're bound to have greater exposure to all the various issues going on in the world. Whether it's a genuine crisis or two billionaires having a public dispute over a series of tweets, chances are we're going to come across it at some point or another. If you couple that with the more than 5 billion people that use social media every day, sharing, tagging, and posting the things they find interesting or compelling, it's not hard to see why it feels like there is always something wrong. So maybe it's not that there are ever more crises happening in the world, maybe we're just more privy to them because of our increasing digital connectedness. But that still doesn't necessarily mean that all the crises we see online are in fact real. Social media pages and websites benefit from us spending time on their sites, which means they have to reel us in somehow. And one way they've found that works wonders is to clickbait us by inflating regular everyday narratives to crisis level. Let me ask you this, if you came across 2 articles on the declining birth rates in the US, which would you be most likely to click on? Why birth rates in the US are declining, or the birth rate crisis, why young Americans don't want kids? You see, it's no secret that people gravitate towards extremes, especially in headlines and titles. Part of this could be because we associate extremes with danger and potential threats. If we can learn about this new crisis threatening us all, we feel like we can take steps to avoid it, or at the very least lessen its impact. And media outlets understand this. They have entire teams of people dedicated to exploiting this primal characteristic, and they are good at it. They'll take a situation and exaggerate it, vilify it even. Why? Well, because it's good for clicks. People will want to know about it, they'll want to read it, and depending on the situation, they'll take sides, which inevitably leads to arguments, controversy, and more clicks for the people reporting it. It's all marketing, and everyone does it. Everyone from brands to politicians and even to nonprofits stand to gain from exploiting these crises, and oftentimes, whoever is the loudest gets the most out of it. Just think about how often we hear something like, XYZ is a serious issue, but if you vote for us, or buy our product, or donate to our cause, we can solve it. But I'm not saying this is all bad. Sometimes organizations have a positive end goal in mind by doing this, and our support can definitely help solve or prevent issues. So if exaggerating an issue can help us get on board, I'm not opposed to it. Unfortunately, I don't think this is the case in most of these instances. I think news outlets, politicians, and even social media influencers just stand to benefit too much by doing this, and 9 times out of 10, it's just done in their own self-interest. And like I said, I'm not trying to demonize this practice or even call it immoral, it just is what it is. But with all that said, even though much of what we see is often being exaggerated, it's important to note that real changes and real issues are actually happening. I used the example of the AI jobs crisis kind of ironically earlier, but it is in fact a real concern for many people, including myself, and it should be. I actually have a great video talking about the implications of AI, so I would encourage you to check it out if you're interested. There's also the long-standing and continuous issue of global warming. We're still not making any real impactful progress in this area. Plus, global power dynamics seem to be up in the air right now. The US has long been seen as the world's foremost superpower, but that position seems to be more and more in question these days. These are all real changes taking place at the time of this video, and, well, frankly, we don't like change. Change creates fear and anxiety because we don't know what the outcomes will be, and when we don't know something, we feel a need to find an explanation for it. As such, it's easy to label something as a crisis because it feels like that describes what's going on. But everything is always in a constant state of change, so does that mean everything is a crisis? And if everything is a crisis, then is anything a crisis? One of my longtime favorite YouTube channels has been Sisyphus55, run by brothers Ben and Isaac Thomas. They recently made a video titled, "Is There a Crisis of Masculinity?" which ended with a beautifully delivered line. If you have a concept or an idea that is continually having a crisis, maybe it's time to rethink that idea. Now obviously they were talking about rethinking the concept of masculinity, but this can be applied to everything. If there is a work ethic crisis with every new generation, maybe it's time to rethink how we define work ethic. If we continually find ourselves in an education crisis, maybe we need to rethink how we approach education. And if we consistently find ourselves in a stream of never-ending crises, maybe it's time to rethink what a crisis really is. But honestly, I don't really trust media outlets to do that for us, so how can we, as individuals, rethink the idea of crisis? Well, it all starts with adopting a healthy amount of skepticism, asking a few questions, and reframing how we approach a crisis. Let's go back to the idea of the US experiencing declining birth rates. If young Americans are having less kids, and all the media outlets are reporting about this as the American birth rate crisis, whether it's true or not, some of the questions you should be asking are, who is this a crisis for? The young Americans themselves, the country as a whole, or political figures who benefit from a high birth rate because it's symbolic to national health? Basically, you should be asking, is there anyone who benefits from framing this issue as a crisis? That'll give you a lot of answers. It's also important to ask, what is the root cause of this issue? Sure, declining birth rates themselves can be a problem, but they're often a result of other, perhaps more legitimate, crises. Economic uncertainty, increased cost of living, environmental concerns, all of these can contribute to people having less children, and solving them would probably solve the birth rate crisis. And finally, it's important to remember that all of these crises can be used as a lens. Oftentimes, they are pointing out real issues that are going on in the world. Yes, they're also often exaggerated for the benefit of whoever is reporting them, but it doesn't change the fact that some of these issues may be real. This is why it's so important to do your own research, gather information from multiple sources, and figure out how this affects you. You may determine that the issue is really no crisis at all, or you may determine that it's definitely a big problem and everyone should be working towards a solution. You can lead the way. Either way, at least the conclusion will have come from you. By the way, I have an awesome video on skepticism and the idea of questioning everything. If you enjoyed this video, then consider checking this one out next. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and with that, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.